Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to do solving systems by substitution. And if you looked in the last video, we did it by graphing. And the reason why this is so useful is because now we're doing it by algebraically. And algebraically is a stronger case because when we're doing things algebraically, we can find our answer. If, graphing works on every single system, except for if those 2 points, when they come together and we're looking for the X and the Y, if it's like some kind of decimal, now you're guessing, you're estimating at best, right? And so that's not a very great place to be. So that's why we are doing it like that. Okay, so the very first method they want you to use is substitution. Substitution is my personal favorite because it works on every single system. Now, what substitution means, like if you've ever gone to a restaurant, I do this all the time. Is there any way that I can get, instead of bacon, can I get avocado instead? Okay. And so if that makes sense to you, I'm saying, hey, instead of bacon, this Y, can I get 0.5x plus 5? Can I get avocado instead? And they're like, sure, you can get avocado instead. And then so in the sandwich itself, instead of putting that Y there, they're going to put that 0.5x plus 5. 0.5x plus 5. And this is legitimate because you're substituting one for the other. You're substituting one for the other. Okay. So now we're going to start solving for X. And if you remember from the last video that we did, we talked about how when we have X's on both sides, we don't like that. So we'll subtract off of half X here, and we're going to subtract off of half X here. So I'm not going to do it here because it's a little bit confusing. I'm just going to do it my own way over here. So I'm going to go 2x minus 1 equals to 0.5x plus 5. And the reason why it's a little confusing is because I know what I want to do. I know where I want to go, but like following someone else's steps is a little bit harder because you want to make sure that you are following their steps, but if you are at all confused at it, it might, be a little bit more difficult. So with that being said, okay, so I don't like X's on both sides. So I'm going to subtract off a half X on each side. So the thing that's left is the minus 1 equals to the plus 5, because that is 0, which is just 5. And then 2x's minus half an X, well, that's just 1.5x, right? 1.5 x's. And then here, what we're going to do is we're going to use SADMAP, right? We're going to use that SADMAP thing. And on the X side, do you see any subtraction or addition? And you're like, yes, I see subtraction and addition. And I say, okay, well, let's get rid of that. So how do you undo subtract 1? How do you undo subtract 1? How do you undo subtract 1? Yep, you add 1 to both sides. So that'll leave you with 6 is equal to 1.5x. Very good. And then you're forced to deal with this other thing, right? So how do you get rid of 1.5? Now, if you recognize that this is just multiplied by 1.5, then you're like, oh, all I have to do is divide by 1.5. Okay. And some of you are like, oh, Ms. Johnson, I don't remember how to divide. No problem. You can use a calculator if your teacher allows you. I allow you to use a calculator. But this is really just asking how many 1.5s are in 6. And I know that there's 2 1.5s in 3. So there must be 4 1.5s in 6. So my answer is X is equal to 4. Okay. One of the things that I like to say is at this point right here, when we got to this line right here, I brought you back to maybe 6th, maybe 7th grade in terms of knowing how to solve this problem, right? And so the reason why I say, oh, now you're back in 6th and 7th grade is because now you can be like, oh, I know how to do this problem, Ms. Johnson. Okay, so let's just continue on real quick. Okay, so now because we're solving systems and this was not in 7th grade, you can't stop after you found your X. You must go back and look for your Y. So here's your X, and now we're going to look for Y. And this is what this part is talking about. It says use the X value to find the Y value. Substitute the X value into one. What they're saying is if this is your X, use one of these equations, your favorite one, to find out what Y is. Now, I don't want to use the decimal just because I know I'm going to make a little bit more mistakes with it. So I'm going to plug it into that other equation. So I'm going to plug it into Y equals 2x minus 1, right, into the original equation. And I'm going to plot that X right there. I'm going to plot that 4 right there. Hold on. Let me let my computer catch up to me. Okay, so oh, it's still not catching up. It is stuck. Okay, so here goes my equation. There it goes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plop that in there. So I'm going to write Y equals to 2 parentheses minus 1, and I'm going to put that 4 in there. So 2 times 4, well, that's just 8. 8 minus 1 is 7, so my Y is 7. So you know you're done when they gave you 2 variables and you're finding the 2 values of each of those variables. Does that make sense? So here's X is equal to 4, Y equals to 7, we're set. So then the last little thing is I'm going to write it as a point. So my solution is 4, 7. And the last step before when we would check our answers is still going to be that same step. Okay, it's still going to be that same step. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug my 4, 7 into both equations to make sure that they worked. Now, because I use this equation, I already know it works for one. I'm just going to plug it into that other one. So this is, again, my check. I'm going to go with Y equals 0.5x plus 5. I'm going to put my X in my X spot and my Y in my Y spot. So equals to 0.5 plus 5. And then I'm going to plug in 4 for that and 7 for this. So 7 equals 2. What's half of 4? What's half of 4? Half of 4 is 2 plus 5 is 7. And 7 equals to 7. And I'm like, yay, Miss Johnson, happy as can be because you know she's right. Okay. Very good. Okay. Next question. It says answer the equation, answer the questions and complete the steps. So this is going to walk you through step by step. I will walk through this with you, but I also want to make sure that, I also want to make sure that you're comfortable with this. Okay. Okay. Give me a second. Okay, good. So it says, which variable should you substitute into the equation? So the very first thing is they're going for strategy. Like, what strategy is a good strategy for you to use right here? They're asking. Well, a good strategy for you to use in this one would be if you were to notice that this Y is already by himself. And because this Y is already by himself, I don't have to do very much work in terms of solving him. Now, can you imagine if this Y wasn't by itself? Can you imagine what you'd have to do first in order to solve this equation? And you're like, oh, I get it. The first step is probably going to be that you're going to have to solve for Y. Yes, but here they gave you a gift because Y is already solved for. So very good. I'm going to solve. I'm not going to solve. I'm going to substitute again, like I did before. I'm going to substitute all of this X plus 3 in for Y. So whenever I see a Y, I'm going to write this instead, because they're equal. Okay, so I'm going to copy that equation. So that's going to be my Y. What expression? Okay, so here, what expression can be substituted for that variable? And this one's going to be X plus 3. And the reason why is because these two are equal. And see, it says it right there. They're equal. Okay, very good. Then the next part, it says rewrite the equation with substitution. So now I'm going to take this equation. I'm going to copy it. 3x plus 2y equals to 16. Now, just like I said in my example before, instead of bacon, can I please have avocado? Right? So when I see bacon, I'm going to hope that they put avocado in that spot. Now, I tend to put parentheses because I want to make sure that I'm substituting correctly. And the biggest thing that I want you to notice is that this X plus 3 goes into the whole y. So this 2 is applying itself to the whole y, not just part of it. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to take this guy up here and put him right in there. Sorry, I'm squeezing him in there. Okay, so there he goes, x plus 3. Let me let my computer catch up to me. Okay. All right. So then what I'm going to do next is I've basically transported you back into 7th grade, right? Because now these equations like this, these were equations that you all dealt with in 7th grade. So you should be very comfortable and familiar. If you're not, no worries. You just have to work at making sure that you're getting a little bit more comfortable with them. Okay. All right. So what would I do first? I think the very first thing I do is distribute. So it's 3x plus 2x plus 6 equals to 16. Now you should understand why I chose to put the parentheses right there. And then I'm just going to simplify this left-hand side. I know that 3x plus 6, I know that 3x plus 2x is 5x. So that is 5x plus 6 equals to 16. And now I just want to SAD map. Right? So I'm going to take this up here just so we can have more room. 5x plus 6, oops, sorry, 6 equals 16. So I say, hey, do you have any subtraction or addition? And you're like, yeah, I have subtraction and addition on this side, on the x side. Okay, well, how do you undo plus 6? And you're like, okay, well, the way I undo plus 6 is I subtract 6 from both sides. Very good. So then I get 5x equals to 10. Well, if that's true, you already know the next step. I'm just going to divide both sides by 5. And x is equal to 2. And you're like, yes, I'm done. And I said, no, you're not. Now, if you remember why you're not done, it has to do with the fact that you are you're solving for a system. So they gave you x and y, so you need to find the values of both x and y. So yay, we solved for x. So here's you solving for x. Now you got to substitute back into one of those equations to find y. Now this is your choice. Do you want to use the first equation or do you want to use the second? Okay, so your choice. Which one would you rather use and solve for? Okay. So I'm just gonna, so I would choose this one because y is already solved for. So I'm gonna bring that equation over here. So I bring that equation, y equals to x plus 3. And then I take my little 2 and I plug him in for my x. So I get y equals to something plus 3, and I take that 2 and I put it there. So therefore y equals to 5. So I'm going to write my point as 2, 5. So there's my solution. And of course, they're going to ask you, check your answers. You are going to check your answers. Okay. But really quickly, because I've already plugged in that one, I'm going to plug it in here. So my question is 2 and 5. So 3 times 2 is 6. Plus 2 times 5 is 10. 6 plus 10 is 16. Yay, I'm so happy, right? So we want to make sure that you are using that clearly. Okay, so then they're going to have you do a word problem with it, of course. And when they're having you do a word problem, I don't want you to get, like nervous. It's still the same thing. You're just dealing with a context. Actually, if you think about it, word problems are much easier to deal with than the actual like problem, because for the most part you're given how to do it just makes sense to you. So at the farmer's market, a customer buys a total of 11 pounds of potatoes and onions. The customer buys 7 pounds more potatoes and onions. How many pounds each of potatoes and onions are bought? Let X be the number of pounds of potatoes and Y be the number of pounds of onions. Here's the system. Oh, they even wrote a system for you. You don't even have to do anything. So examine the equations. They want you to look at these equations. Okay. So which one would you, which one's already set up for you? Which variable is already set up for you? Yeah, and hopefully you said the first equation for X because it's already done. The first equation is solved for one variable, so you could substitute that into the second equation. So notice when you're doing stuff, the first equation, because it's solved for you, is going to help you with the second equation, right? Okay. Very good. All right. So, okay. So the next part is, it says the expression blank can be, let me catch up to this other part. So the expression blank can be substituted for X in the equation blank. Okay. The expression blank can be substituted in place of X. Now, who does X equal to? Who does X equal to? Who does X equal to? Oh, X equals to Y plus 7. So that's what we're going to write here. Y plus 7 can be substituted in place of X into the equation, the other equation. So now we're going to put X plus Y equals 11. Sorry for the messy writing there. Okay, so now we're going to solve the equation, right? So now we're plugging in. So once I get here, when they start doing these directions, sometimes their words are a little bit confusing. So I'm going to pull you over here. So we said X equals to Y plus 7 is going to go into X plus Y equals to 11. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this and put it right. Oops, I did it wrong. I'm going to take all of this and put it in for the X spot. Okay, in for the X spot. So again, I will be using parentheses and then plus Y equals to 11. Okay, and then so when I do that, I go ahead and substitute that in Y plus 7, and then I'm just going to simplify. All I'm going to do is just simplify. Okay. All right. So then I know that Y plus Y is 2Ys plus 7 equals 11. And then you would use your SADMAP. Should already know you'll be subtracting 7 first. So you get 2Y equals to 4. Therefore, Y equals to 2. Okay. Very good. Okay. All right. So then most people will be like, oh my gosh, I'm done. No, you're not. Right? Because they gave me 2 variables, I need to find the value of 2 variables. So because I found Y, I now need to find X. I'm just going to scooch this over a little bit. So which variable would you rather use? And again, this is choice. It doesn't really matter here. Okay. Let's see. All right, very good. Okay, so I would choose the first equation. So I'm going to plug that into X equals to Y plus 7. So I'm going to take my 2 and plug it all the way over there into my Y, because that's what it says. So the next line, it will say X is equal to something plus 7. And I'm going to put that 2 there. Okay, and then now I get X is equal to 9. And so because I have my point 9 comma 7, I can now check my answers. Now this is a context, right? So they're gonna want you to tell me what it means. So 9 is the number of potatoes and 7 is the other one. Okay. Okay, so the next thing that I would do is just check my answers, and I'm going to do that really quick. Does oops, I wrote it wrong. It's supposed to be 9 comma 2. It's 9 2, not 9 7. That's a 2. Okay, so is 9 equal to 2 plus 7? You're like, yes. And is 9 plus 2 equal to 11? And you're like, yes. So yay, Miss Johnson's happy. And she would have found this mistake if we were doing all that other stuff. Okay. So when you're solving for a system by substitution, how can you tell that the system has no solution? So we didn't go over an example of when it has no solution, but I think I told you in the previous lessons that when it comes down to this first variable right here, when it says y is equal to 2, it'll probably say something like 4 equals to 0 because 4 doesn't equal to 0, right? And so that's one way of doing that. Okay. All right. Okay. So the next thing is for substitution, always take a look at your equations first and decide if there's a faster way to solve this because you're paying attention to the fact that they gave you some really good information. Like here, x is equal to. So find that first. All right. Hope that makes sense.